Snow rode the wind like 1,000 white ghosts, piling against the split-rail fence that marked the edge of Cade Thorne's ranch. The storm had come in faster than a mustang on fresh grass, swallowing the plains in a shivering haze. Cade had been fixing the lantern outside the barn when he spotted a dark shape stumbling toward the fence, small and fragile against the howling winter night. At first he thought it was a calf that had slipped out in the cold, but the closer the figure came, the clearer it became that this was no animal. It was a woman, her coat torn, her steps dragging, her breath steaming the air in desperate bursts. Cade dropped the lantern and ran, boots thudding in heavy rhythm over the frozen ground. She reached the fence, gripped the top rail as if it were the last thing tethering her to this world, and then her knees buckled. Cade slid under the rail and caught her just before she hit the snow. Her skin was ice, her lips near blue, and her eyes fluttered like she was fighting to stay conscious. "Ma'am, stay with me," Cade muttered, lifting her as gently as a man his size could. She tried to speak, but only a breath of sound escaped. She sagged against his chest, fainting completely. Cade didn't waste a second. The storm didn't forgive stragglers, and he wasn't about to let a stranger die at his fence. Inside the warm cabin sat the only thing Cade cherished more than the land: his 2 children, Ella, 8, and Jace, 6. The moment the door burst open and Cade stepped inside with the unconscious woman in his arms, both kids froze. Their eyes went wide like they were staring at something half frightening, half magical. "Pa, who is she?" Ella whispered, wrapping her arms around herself as if the cold had followed him in. Cade kicked the door shut, snow spraying off his coat. "Don't know yet," he answered, laying the woman on the long sofa near the fire. Found her on the fence, nearly frozen solid. Jace crept closer, peering at her face. "She looks like an angel," he breathed, "like the ones in Ma's old Christmas book." Cade's chest tightened for a heartbeat. He didn't like when the kids talked about their late mother, not because he didn't miss her, but because it made that empty place in the cabin feel larger. They worked together, Cade heating water, Ella fetching blankets, Jace holding the lantern so they could see. Slowly, the stranger's breathing grew steadier, color returning to her cheeks. A loose strand of golden hair fell across her face, and Ella gently pushed it back with small fingers. "Pa," Ella whispered, "can we keep her for Christmas? She looks like she needs a home." Cade swallowed hard. He wasn't in the business of keeping strays, especially not full-grown ones with unknown trouble chasing them. But looking at that fragile woman lying in his warm cabin, while the storm clawed at the windows, he knew he couldn't turn her out. "Let's just get her through the night," he finally said, his voice low. "Then we'll see." But the kids didn't hear the uncertainty in his tone. They only saw the soft-breathing stranger on their sofa, the one they'd already named in their hearts. Their Christmas angel. Morning crept slow over the plains, laying pale gold across the snowdrifts. Cade had slept lightly in his chair beside the sofa, waking at every shift the stranger made. When her eyes finally fluttered open, cautious and unsure, he straightened. She stared at the ceiling first, breathing shallow, her fingers curling around the blanket like she didn't trust the world to be real. Then her gaze slid to Cade, and fear sparked bright and raw. "It's all right," he said gently, lifting his hands in peace. "You're at my ranch. My kids and I pulled you out of the storm." She blinked fast, swallowing hard, then tried to sit up. "Careful," Cade warned, but she was already wincing, a hand flying to her side. "You took a fall out there," he added. "Lucky you didn't freeze." She searched his face as if judging whether she was safe, and the silence stretched thin between them. Ella peeked in from the kitchen doorway, her braids bouncing. "She's awake," the girl whispered in a breathless little cheer. Jace appeared right behind her, clutching a wooden toy horse. "Angel lady," he whispered, beaming. The woman's lips parted in surprise, as though she'd never been called anything kind in a long while. Cade cleared his throat. "Kids, give her some room." The children retreated to the stove but didn't stop watching her with wide, shining eyes. "What's your name?" Cade asked, keeping his tone slow and steady. She hesitated, her eyes darting to the window where the storm had settled but not passed. She began, then stopped. Her throat worked. "My name is Nora," she said finally, but Cade heard the crack in it, like she'd chosen it in that very moment. "You running from something?" he asked, the rancher in him too honest to dance around danger. Nora stiffened, her breaths quickening. "Please," she whispered, "I won't bring trouble to your door." Cade knew that tone. He'd heard it in men hunted by debt collectors, in women fleeing cruel hands, in travelers who'd seen something they wished they hadn't. But before he could ask more, the front door rattled under a heavy fist. Cade stood instantly, his muscles hardening like iron. He moved to the window, eased the curtain back, and cursed under his breath. 3 riders sat on the ridge, dark shapes against the stormlight, one of them already sliding from his saddle. "Kids," Cade said quietly. "Go to the back room and stay there." Ella grabbed Jace's hand without question, pulling him down the hall. Nora pushed herself upright, despite the pain. "They found me," she whispered, terror seeping through every word. Cade grabbed his rifle off the rack above the fireplace, checking the chamber with practiced ease. "Who are they?" he asked, but Nora shook her head. "Bad men," she breathed. "They won't stop." Cade didn't like how true that sounded. He opened the door, only a crack, enough for his broad frame to block the entrance. A man with a scar across his cheek stood on the porch, his breath steaming like a furnace. "Morning," the stranger drawled, though the edge in his smile held no warmth. "We're looking for someone, a woman, small thing, maybe wandered off in the cold." Cade didn't blink. "Ain't seen anyone," he answered flatly. The man's smile thinned. "Mind if we look around?" Cade shifted the rifle into view. "I mind plenty." The rider's eyes dipped to the weapon, then drifted past Cade toward the faint glow inside. For a heartbeat, Cade thought the man might push his luck, but then he lifted his hands in mock surrender. "Didn't mean no offense, just making sure she didn't freeze to death." He lied easily. He tipped his hat and stepped back toward his horse. Cade watched them ride off, but something in their slow retreat told him they'd circle back like wolves testing a fence. When he closed the door, Nora was sitting upright, shaking so hard the blanket trembled around her. "You should have told them," she whispered. "You should have handed me over." Cade frowned, insulted by the idea. "Ma'am, I don't give strangers to men who smell like trouble." She stared at him, her eyes filling with something that was not fear this time but disbelief. "Why?" she murmured. Cade glanced toward the hallway where his kids hid. "Because my children saw you as a Christmas angel," he said quietly, "and I'm not about to prove them wrong." Nora pressed a hand to her mouth, fighting a sob. Cade wasn't sure if it was relief or grief breaking out of her. "Maybe both. You're safe here for now," he added, sitting across from her but keeping his rifle close. "But I need the truth, every last piece. If those men are coming back, and I reckon they are, we need to know what we're up against." Nora closed her eyes, gathering her courage, and when she opened them again, the truth she carried was ready to spill like a storm about to break. Nora's hands twisted the blanket as she finally began to speak, her voice soft but steadying with each breath. "Those men worked for Grayson Morrow," she said. Cade felt a coldness settle heavier than the winter air outside. Everyone in the territory knew the Morrow name, a cattle baron with a heart as empty as a dried well. "I was hired as a nurse at his winter lodge," Nora continued. "It was supposed to be honest work, tending to his father. The old man had taken ill." Her eyes darkened. "But I overheard things I wasn't meant to, things about land grabs, forged deeds, killings made to look like accidents." Cade listened in silence, his jaw tightening. The Morrows ran their business with fists instead of handshakes. "I stayed quiet," Nora said, her voice trembling. "I thought no one knew I'd heard anything. But then the old man asked to speak with me. He wanted me to warn someone, a lawyer in town. He said Grayson had plans that would cost innocent people their homes." Nora swallowed hard, but before the old man could finish, Grayson walked in. Cade closed his eyes, already knowing the rest but letting her say it. "They dragged me outside," she whispered. "I escaped only because a ranch hand felt pity and didn't tie the rope tight enough. I ran into the storm. I thought I could make it to the next ranch house, but the snow was too deep. I didn't even know where I was going. I only knew I had to get away." Cade leaned back, exhaling slow. "And you landed at my fence," he said quietly. Nora nodded, tears forming. "I didn't mean to trouble your family." Cade shook his head. "You didn't. Trouble came long before you did." The cabin walls creaked as wind swept against them like a warning. "They ain't done," Cade said. "Those men'll be back, and with more riders." Nora looked at him with a mix of fear and guilt. "You don't owe me anything," she whispered. Cade stared into the fire for a long moment. "Maybe not," he answered, "but I owe my children a world where good people ain't hunted for telling the truth." Nora pressed a hand to her chest, her breath catching with a kind of hopeless gratitude. Cade stood, checking the rifle and the shells laid out like a promise on the table. Dawn came pale and cold, lighting the snow in shades of blue and silver. Cade had barely slept. He'd kept the lantern low and watched the tree line through the frosted window. When a dark line of riders finally appeared on the ridge, his stomach knotted, but not with fear. More like resolve. "Stay inside," Cade told Nora. "Lock the back room door. Keep the kids down low." Nora grabbed his arm as he moved past her. "Cade, there's too many." He gave her a thin smile. "I don't plan on letting them get close." He stepped onto the porch, the boards groaning beneath his boots. The air was sharp enough to sting. The men rode down slow, their horses kicking up clouds of snow. Grayson Morrow himself rode at their center, tall, broad, draped in a long black coat that snapped like a flag in the wind. His eyes were narrow slits of ice. "Thorne," Grayson called, "we're looking for a thief and a liar. She's in your house." Cade held his rifle steady. "Ain't nobody stealing anything here," he answered. "But you sure sound like you are." A few of the men laughed, short, cruel laughs that didn't reach their eyes. Grayson tilted his head. "I'll make it simple," he said. "Hand her over, and me and my boys will be on our way." Cade didn't blink. "No." Grayson's smile died like a candle in wind. "I was hoping you'd say that," he replied. His hand dropped to his holster, but Cade was faster. A single warning shot cracked through the frozen morning, slicing past Grayson's boot and burying into the snow. Horses spooked, riders jerked their reins. "Next one ain't a warning," Cade growled. The standoff hung suspended like breath in cold air. Then Grayson's face twisted. "Get him," he barked. The men charged, snow flying under pounding hooves. Cade braced himself against the porch post and fired. The first rider tumbled from his saddle. The second veered off, cursing. Cade shot again, smoke rising in the freezing wind. Bullets chipped the porch rail, slamming into the cabin walls. Cade ducked and fired back, heart steady as his aim. He had no room for fear, not when his children were inside watching from shadows. One rider broke past the others, heading for the back of the cabin. Cade cursed, vaulting off the porch. His boots hit the snow hard as he sprinted. He caught the man just as he swung off his horse, tackling him into a drift. They rolled, fists flying, snow bursting around them like thrown grain. The rider reached for his gun, but Cade slammed his wrist down, sending the weapon skidding. A final blow knocked the man out cold. Cade stood, breath heaving, and turned to see Grayson himself approaching on foot, gun leveled. "You should have stayed out of this," Grayson hissed. Cade lifted his rifle again, but before either man could fire, the back door burst open. Nora stood there, holding Cade's spare revolver with both shaking hands. "Leave them alone," she said, her voice breaking but her aim true. Grayson turned toward her, rage twisting his face. Cade used that moment, his shot ringing through the quiet snow. Grayson fell, the gun slipping from his hand. The remaining riders fled, their courage vanishing with their leader. Nora dropped the revolver, sobbing in relief. Cade reached her, steadying her shoulders. Ella and Jace rushed out, wrapping their arms around Nora like she belonged to them. Cade looked at his children, at the woman who had changed everything simply by fainting at his fence, and he knew the truth in his bones. "Reckon Christmas angels show up however they please," he murmured, and for the first time in a long while, hope settled warm in the Thorne cabin despite the cold outside.